Coming to you live from the Interaction Media Studio in Morgantown. Welcome to Positively West Virginia. I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Today we're going to visit with Max Knapp. Mac is the owner of Blackbear Capital and a company called Intellispect. Two companies. Max is an entrepreneur and he's based in Ripley, West Virginia. Of course, that's in Jackson County. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about our mission here at Positively West Virginia. Every week, we talk with West Virginia business leaders and share their success stories with people just like you in West Virginia and across the country. When we first started this podcast project back in 2017, one of the things we set out to do was to encourage and inspire our listeners with positive business stories from right here in the Mountain State. To date, we've produced more than 200 episodes, and Positively West Virginia is now a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of promoting small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positivelywv.com. You know, I get to see so many positive things happening in West Virginia business every day that a lot of people, quite frankly, never get to hear about or see. So my team here at Interaction Media is working to change that with this show so that people realize you don't have to leave West Virginia to find great business opportunities. They're right here in our state. We want to encourage people to stay here, come back here, build great companies and organizations right here in West Virginia. All of our guests are people who are actually getting that done too, day in and day out. And I'm convinced we can learn a lot from their experiences and, more importantly, their stories. Our guest, once again this morning, is Max Knapp. He's the owner of Blackbear Capital and Intellispect, located in Ripley, West Virginia. Max, thanks for being on the show today.
Great to be here, Jim. Again, I'm a huge fan of your show, and I, along with your other guests, are very appreciative of the spotlight that you're putting on entrepreneurs across our state. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Max. I'm excited to have you on our show to learn more about your story. If you don't know Max Knapp, he grew up in Jackson County, West Virginia, where he graduated from Ravenswood High School. Upon graduation, he attended West Virginia Wesleyan College on a golf scholarship and obtained his bachelor's degree in accounting. After finishing at Wesleyan, Max decided to further his education by attending Vanderbilt University's Owen Graduate School of Management, where he received his master's degree in finance. From there, Max had a very successful banking career on Wall Street. In late 2016, Max decided to move back to Charleston, West Virginia, to help advance the state's effort to diversify its economy. Max accepted a role as a portfolio manager in United Bank's wealth management group, where he analyzed and recommended a wide range of investment opportunities for high net worth and institutional clients. Since moving back to West Virginia, Max has founded several small businesses in West Virginia and understands the complexities and importance of making commerce work in rural America. He now focuses most of his time on two entrepreneurial ventures that we're going to talk about today: Blackbear Capital, which is a wealth management firm, and Intellispect, a fintech software as a service or SaaS company. We invited Max on the show today to talk about his companies, to share his story, and to give our audience some valuable insight into the companies he leads right here in West Virginia. Max, take a minute, fill in some gaps from that brief intro, and give us a little behind the curtain look into your company.
Well, you covered it very well, Jim. And I think the message that I really want to speak today is kind of about my journey here, growing up in rural West Virginia, small town America. And I was kind of always taught to get that education. And from a very young age, I realized that I wanted to leave the state for whatever reason. That stigma was just there, as you're seeing now with a lot of young people. And that's what I did. I thought I was getting that big boy education by moving away and working in New York, et cetera. And then, shortly thereafter, I kind of realized that, look, West Virginia's home. It needs my help. I don't want to be part of the problem any longer, right? And so when I was living in Florida with my most previous role, I kind of had the idea of look, West Virginia is struggling. There's a lot of opportunity for young, competent professionals. And I wouldn't have been willing to give up the amount of upside that I had in my previous careers to move back to West Virginia if I didn't believe that. So, since moving back, like you said, I started with United Bank, got some great experience. I was there for about 5 years. And then up until the end of 2020, I kind of pushed out on my own just through the experiences that I'd gained over the previous 10 years of my career. And so now, like you said, I've started a company called Blackbear Capital, actually with my brother-in-law, Preston, here in Ripley, West Virginia. And then also through my experiences and networking, I met a gentleman, and we started a company called Intellispect, which, like you said, was a software as a service company.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's a great background on how you got started. Max, I'd like to know, from your perspective, and we're going to kind of do this in two segments because I want to know what the 30-second pitch is for Blackbear Capital, and then the 30-second pitch for Intellispect. In other words, what is it you tell people you do with both those companies?
Yeah, so Blackbear Capital is an independent investment firm. And as a wealth management firm, we're very holistic in our help that we provide for people, not just investment advice, but we're looking at their tax planning, estate planning, financial planning, people that are looking to retire. So again, it's very holistic. And what I think is our differentiator is that we are independent. We're not tied to any bank, no other financial institution, and we are known as what's called a fiduciary. So we have a legal obligation to put our clients' interests ahead of our own. And what you don't see from a lot of organizations and the big time investment managers across our country is that they're selling commission products, right? Clients should always know that we are going to have their best interests ahead of our own, because again, we are a fiduciary. So that would probably be the best description of Blackbear Capital.
Yeah. Now, how about on the other side of the spectrum here with your other company, Intellispect? What do you
Yep.
guys do there?
Intellispect is a software that we provide on a subscription basis to financial advisors across the country. And what this software does is it allows financial advisors to prospect for new clients. So on a very broad-based level, it would be considered a lead generation tool for financial advisors.
Yeah, that's very cool. We've been hearing a lot about the financial tech, or as people call it, fintech, for some time, and there's sort of a notion driving around the state of West Virginia that the fintech is a perfect fit for West Virginia.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we have the talent here. Again, I don't think there's many industries that couldn't be done here in West Virginia, but again, fintech is very much remote. And I do think West Virginia is prime for fintech emergence, especially with a lot of the players that are now coming into the state.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. So thanks for giving us the rundown on those those 30-second pitches for both those companies. Max, what would you say is the thing you're most excited about right now?
Right now, I think what I find the biggest problem here in West Virginia is for the emergence of startups is people. And I think now we're starting to get a lot of involvement from people outside of the state that have ties to West Virginia, and we're really pushing on the movement of the remote worker. And so I think that's a really good first step to attracting talented people here to West Virginia. And I do see a fair amount of traction from that as well. With these programs, we're incentivizing people to come here. So I'm really excited about what the state and what other fellow entrepreneurs are doing to get people like myself back to West Virginia.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously one of the main programs is Ascend WV, which is the
That's right.
collaborative through West Virginia University and the that whole program with the Smith family, Brad and Elise Smith. So that's super cool, and lots of buzz happening there. So just out of curiosity, Max, what was it that you saw in West Virginia? Obviously, like you explained there a few minutes ago, you left, you went to work on Wall Street, went to work in Florida, working big, massive companies and big banking institutions. What was the draw for you?
Well, when I moved away, what I always tell people when I come back here and they ask me about what was the best experience when you were away? And honestly, I don't regret the skill set that I developed when I was away. But honestly, what I would say is the biggest strength from my time spent outside of West Virginia is gaining perspective or culture. And so when I was surrounded by a lot of A types, a lot of people that are very driven, ambitious, you see kind of how their mind operates and the opportunities that they're looking for, right? And so, especially when I moved down to Florida, the role that I was in was kind of a venture capital, private equity role, where we were looking at businesses, investing in them across the United States to make them better. And so, when I was thinking about West Virginia, it's not known as a startup state, but what I was thinking was, look, there's a lot of businesses in West Virginia that have been around for a long time, that are very stable, secure, that have a lot of opportunity, that are simply dying of old age, right? So I knew immediately, just given my background and given my skill set, there would be opportunities for me on the entrepreneurial side. So shortly after moving back, I'll just give a really quick story. there was a health club that I worked out at growing up in Ripley, and it had been for sale for about 2 years. And so, just naturally, I looked into it, looked at the financials, did some diligence, and I immediately realized that there was opportunity there. I mean, this is opportunity that other people in the area and in the state wouldn't see. And it's simply because of ignorance or not having that education, right, or that background. And so, I knew immediately, just given how it ran, the technology that they used, you could almost flip a switch and make it 25% more profitable, right? And just quickly, we ended up buying the business for $60,000 less than the real estate was appraised for, and I didn't include the business or the equipment. So immediately, for me, I knew it was very limited risk that I would be taking. And again, knowing how their memberships worked, month-to-month cash basis, by flipping it to an auto-recurring system where, as most gyms outside of West Virginia are, like I saw in the New York and the Floridas, that was immediately going to turn the company, like I said, 25% in the other direction. So I ultimately purchased that business, sold it about a month ago. It was a great investment, but that's just a good example of, there's a lot of those type of opportunities here in West Virginia. And again, if you're a competent professional and you're willing to accept a limited amount of risk, again, I mean, there is no ceiling here for you here in West Virginia. And that's kind of what I saw outside of the city or outside of the state after spending some time and again around these other people, these other types of individuals that have that similar drive and that similar ambition.
That's awesome, man. And honestly, if we could bottle that message up and send it to every young person who moved away from West Virginia 10, 15 years ago and encourage them to come back, that would be an incredible story right there.
That's right. I agree. I shout it from the mountaintops.
That's super cool, and as I'm listening to you talk about that story of the health club that you were describing, I see it here, all over North Central West Virginia as well. You see these companies that are just kind of aging out, like it may be a 1 or 2 person mom and pop service business, but they're ready to shut down. And what happens most of the time is they just close the doors.
That's right.
And that might be, a company that's doing, $1 to $2 million in revenue, 15-20% margin with owner salary and everything. And there may be a way to keep that business going, keep those jobs that are in place, 2 or 3 jobs or whatever.
Yep.
If somebody can come in and just take that thing over and run it the right way, not to say that it was misrun or anything like that, but injecting new blood, new life into it. And I think that there's, I talk about this all the time, especially on our mastermind show every Friday, but I feel like there's a lot of ways to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to have, you don't have to be a fintech startup, developing a software platform and have patents and all this kind of stuff. You could start out bootstrapping it. You could start it out with a structured buyout of maybe a business owner who wants to retire, and have that residual income, those kinds of things. You don't even necessarily have to have a lot of capital to get started. That's my humble opinion.
Yep.
I know the way I started my company 10 years ago, it was just on just a shoestring budget,
Right.
we just made it work. And it, I had one of the best pieces of advice I ever had was, Jim, do you have an office? No. Great. Do you have a business card? No. Great. Do you have a logo? No. Great. You know what you need before you need all that? I said, what? A customer. Customer. You got to get
Right.
a customer first, and you get all that other stuff. You can get all the the cool place to cool office and all that stuff, but you got to build a company first. Anybody can start a company, but it's hard to really build one, and it looks like you're doing a great job with that. What's from Max, from your perspective on both these companies, what's the geographic markets that you serve?
Well, Blackbear Capital, just due to regulation in the investment industry, for good reason, you have to register in each state where you have a customer. So we are currently registered in West Virginia, meaning we can serve the entire population of West Virginia. We do foresee that going to surrounding states, et cetera. But for right now, we're kind of just focusing in our demographic. From an Intellispect perspective, given that it is a software, our customer base is any investment advisor across the United States. So, for example, we have a customer in Portland, we have a customer in Philadelphia and Buffalo, New York. We haven't even actually started marketing to any firms in West Virginia. And there's a few reasons for that, but simply because there's so much opportunity across the country. Again, we're talking 10,000 different investment advisors across the United States, who's going to be the best fit for our product. So I would just say, broadly speaking, most of North America can be a customer for Intellispect.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Uh, at this moment, how many employees do you have?
With Blackbear Capital, there's two, and the same with Intellispect.
Oh, very cool. Max, so how long have you been doing the entrepreneurial journey now, total?
So since moving back to West Virginia in 2016, my first entrepreneurial venture was the health club that I mentioned, and that was in 2017. So it's going on, it's right at 4 years.
All
And
right.
just, since moving back, it's kind of continuing to snowball in terms of the opportunity.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, what's been your best business moment in those 4 years?
Honestly, probably the exit from the health club. I'm not taking anything away from what I'm doing now. I've kind of taken a leap of faith. I'm now, like, the gym, for instance, was something I did on the side, right, where I could gain a little bit of income while working. So I did take a leap of faith to start these companies. But exiting the health club kind of not really took a weight off my shoulders, but it said, look, I took a risk 4 years ago, and that risk ultimately paid off. So I think that the biggest adversity from a lot of people doing something from an entrepreneurial standpoint is that risk, right? Maybe you're giving up income, a stable income, or you're taking on debt like we did. And so that kind of just sits on you. So when we exited, it was like, wow, this paid off. This is great. So I would probably have to give that, as of now, probably the exit.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love hearing that, and that sort of your mindset that went into that. It's not. I feel like when you're buying a company like that, and then subsequently selling it, preserving the jobs is part of the equation, right? You want to preserve those jobs. You want to make sure that you're keeping and retaining quality people to
That's
run
right.
those companies. But ultimately, the exit strategy is an investor is where it's at, right? The money is made when you purchase the business, right? Because
Right.
you're getting it at a great rate, great deal, if you will. And then your job as the investor is to come in and build the equity of that business back up, the margins, the profit, all those kinds of things. The P&L is the is the
Right.
what it's all about at that moment. And then when you sell it and able to quote unquote cash in a little bit, that's pretty awesome. So
Yes.
I love hearing that story, and thank you for sharing that.
And just to touch on your point really quickly, I definitely don't want to take anything away from the journey.
Yeah.
It was 4 years, it was a first, and I gained a ton of experience. Like you said, the
Sure.
people, again, it's always the people. And the fact that I had never really had direct management experience. I mean, so there were so many lessons that I learned from that experience,
Yeah.
that I'm extremely grateful for.
I love it, man. And I oftentimes, think about, like, if I wasn't doing what I love my job right now. My company is awesome and I love it, but I often think, like, that would be a fun thing to do, is to find these companies that are at their end stage, so to speak, like we were
Right.
just talking about, and be able to come in and turn them around and save those jobs, and maybe attract people to come back to West Virginia to run them, those
Right.
kinds of things. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that was just kind of neat, going down that path with you. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I'm gonna flip the switch on the other side of it. What's been your worst business moment? Take us to that place of your worst experience and tell us that story.
Sure. It would probably also involve the health club. And again, it always comes down to people, having an employee maybe that's underperforming, or maybe kind of doing something that uh, probably pushes the bounds of legality, to where, you do have to let someone go. That's always a tough situation where you
Mm.
have to have a difficult conversation with people. And so, ultimately, when you're growing a business, I think your ability to put the right people in the right seats is ultimately what's going to get you to success.
Yeah.
And that does involve, kind of removing people along the way. So,
Yeah.
um, just a few circumstances like that, which we all have, operating a business, I would certainly say is kind of the down moments of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. Max, I want to take a minute just to mention our sponsors. They are the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media. The support we receive from these West Virginia companies allow us to highlight the incredible things happening throughout the great state of West Virginia on this podcast and this live stream, Positively West Virginia. Our guest today is Max Knapp. Max is the owner of Blackbear Capital and Intellispect. Uh, he's he's joining us today from Ripley, West Virginia, of course, in Jackson County. Max, I want to jump right back into it. What's the vision that you have for Blackbear Capital and Intellispect, respectively, long term?
Yep. Okay. There's a couple different paths here for each, but for Blackbear Capital, I see that as a career business, right? It's something that we want to grow to where we have people working in all the different metros in West Virginia, covering Morgantown, Charleston, et cetera, and then even outside of West Virginia through maybe acquisition. So that's a long-term goal. It's something I very much enjoy, the business side of kind of boots on the ground sort of business development activity. On the Intellispect side, it's very much a, hey, we want to pick up clients. Software is very high margin, as you probably know. And so for us, it's getting us to a point of recurring revenue to where we're attractive to maybe a strategic buyer. Ultimately, there's no reason to brush around it. It's kind of, hey, we picked up and we have $1 million of recurring revenue. We're now attractive to the bigger fintech players for a potential exit is the way that we see it. It's developing that customer base. So I don't want to put a timetable on it, but that's kind of the ultimate goal there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super cool. Just understanding, how that business dynamic and the way that you're speaking about it. Obviously, you have great experience, you have great education, that you've been able to pour into yourself. Talk a little bit about that, that whole idea of, building a company with an exit strategy. How important is it to do that? I think our viewers would be interested in knowing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, what I would say is it definitely doesn't make sense to get ahead of yourself, thinking of an exit before you really have a business model down.
Where you get a customer.
Yeah, right. You kind of in the back of your mind know, look, ultimately for the end life of a business, either you're shutting down, you're passing it on to some like an employee, or you're going to sell it. And so depending on the type of business maybe that you're going into, in this case being software, that's kind of a natural exit for us is, a bigger company that has the distribution, et cetera, they're going to be able to run this company a lot more successfully than we are, simply because of their resources. But, it is very important, especially kind of once you've got your feet under you, moving forward and depending on what you want to do for the rest of your career. Look, if it's something you want to do and continue to grow until the end, then you have some time. But, what I'm starting to find now that I'm at age 31 and these opportunities kind of are coming is, look, I only have so much time. I can't spread myself too thin. And, ultimately pretty early on, me and my partner with Intellispect, we kind of said, look, this is our natural exit here. We think once we get to this point that will be attractive to a strategic or a financial buyer. So that to us is kind of how we formulated that. But we knew going in what the likelihood would be, but it is very important to kind of develop, hey, like for instance, with Blackbear, if this isn't something I wanted to do, you would need to find probably an employee or another financial firm in the area that may be interested in your book of business. So there's always opportunities there. But again, that kind of goes back to our conversation about the health club. Look, these owners had the business for 20 some years. They were at retirement age and they were struggling to find someone to buy it. And so again, if we were in a market like Charlotte, that's much more saturated, much more competitive, I don't think there would be much of an issue, right? So it's a different story here in West Virginia, but there's definitely still potential.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I appreciate that. How do you attract new customers?
On the Blackbear side, again, it's very much boots on the ground, reaching out to. It's all relationships. What I would say about life in general is that it's relationships. If you could say one thing, but this business especially, because you have to build credibility, you have to build trust. You're talking someone into giving you their life savings, so they need to like you, they need to trust you. So it's just working with other centers of influence like accountants, trying to build up referral partners, et cetera. So it is very just time intensive, and you got to get out there and meet people and be personable. And with Intellispect, as you're much more aware than I am, it's such a digital age out there now, right? Like I said, we're not selling this software to anyone in West Virginia. I'm not just going down the street to a bank and pitching it to them. We're getting the word out online, through paid ads, whether that be LinkedIn, Google campaigns, social media, et cetera. So it's two different ball games. And what I could say, again, it's just been such a really good learning experience, kind of getting that digital marketing under my belt, because previously I had relatively zero experience.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Max, what's one of the biggest challenges you face right now?
The biggest challenges, on the Blackbear side is just people. Here in West Virginia, what I would say is that there's probably not a lot of wealth creation. Again, you don't see a lot of people starting new businesses here in West Virginia that are now all of a sudden a millionaire, right? Like you would in maybe the DCs of the world. So it's just population demographics. And then on the Intellispect side, COVID was by far the biggest detractor. It kind of started at a pretty inopportune time where companies are cutting their budgets, et cetera. So you're kind of fighting that dynamic as well. When you're doing business to business sales, it seems like there's always something, there's always a detractor from your ability to make a sale on the other end. So it just, how do I show the end user that there is value in our service? And that's just a continual refinement over quarters.
I always talk about it in terms of how do you differentiate yourself, right? And there's like you were saying, in software, there's a lot of software competition. There's a lot of competition in the financial services aspect. You got to differentiate yourself for
That's
sure.
awesome. Yep.
And I think that's good stuff. Max, what's one piece of advice you would give to young business owners, entrepreneurs in West Virginia, maybe even somebody who's listening to this out of state and saying, I like Max's story. I think I could maybe move back to West Virginia and do something. What's one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I hate to sound cliche, but grit is by far the most important, what I would say, quality in an entrepreneur. And if you're looking to start a business, there's a lot of excuses that people make about West Virginia about not being able to start businesses here, and a big one is that they say there's a lack of capital or a lack of funding. And I'm kind of on the other side of the story here. I think there's a perfect amount of capital and funding here, given how much activity there is, how big the pipeline is. So what I would say to an aspiring entrepreneur is, look, get your idea of your product or your service to as far as possible, as far as you can, before you think you need some sort of financial assistance, and then take it 10 steps further than that. Because, you may have a good idea, you may have a good concept, but you're not really going to be able to aspire confidence from an investor simply on a concept. You need to, like you said, you need to acquire a customer. You need to validate the fact that someone is willing to pay for your good or your service. So and you just got to grit through it. I mean, and that's what I'm trying to say is that we have basically a nonprofit on every corner of the street here in West Virginia, and they all do great work. But what we lack is people that's willing to do. So you need to, frankly, you just got to get out there and again, take it as far as you can, and then take it further.
Yep, absolutely. I think I'm all for business plans and goals and everything. I mean,
Right.
I do all that stuff myself, but when push comes to shove, you actually have to get out there and do it. And especially the risk taker, the entrepreneur, the person who's putting it on the line right there, like you were just talking about. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes from that, knowing that
Absolutely.
when you lay your head on the pillow at night, that you've basically poured everything you could into
Right.
this thing, and you're starting to see that progress and seeing the needle move, and maybe being able to hire a person or get your first office space and those kinds of things. And I'm kind of a I'm kind of a grassroots entrepreneur, I guess. I didn't have a lot of money when I started my company, and didn't have access to capital, quote unquote, right, like everybody talks about. But what I did have is a determination, right, to figure out how to make something. And you used the word recurring revenue there a few minutes ago on the fintech side. And I think that being able to just figure that out, as an entrepreneur I was like, I remember I had a business partner when I first started, and he like, we'd be in May 25th. That's the date we're recording the show. He'd say, "Hey, what's June looking like?" I'm like, "It's only the 25th of May, man. Come on." We're we're going to be okay. But then once we started figuring out, hey, we can have contracts and people with that would help, pay for our services each month. And we started figuring that out. How can we add value? How do we solve people's problems? Then it was just like, just a light bulb went off. So I think that your advice to entrepreneurs is spot on, man.
And
Thank you for that.
one more point on that with Intellispect, especially me and my co-founder, we were in this investment business, and so we kind of had this idea, this concept of a software that would be really valuable to other advisors.
Sure.
And what I would say is, if my partner, which is just a very talented individual, if he hadn't taught himself how to code, just kind of on his own personal free time, this idea would be non-existent. We went out to agencies and developers to see what it would cost to develop it, and it was 50 to 100 grand, right? And so us, it's just like, do we spend 50 to $100,000 on an idea, a concept, and take that risk? And the answer is almost always going to be no, right? Unless you have deeper pockets, and like us. So for us, we very much had to bootstrap this idea, and if he didn't have the skill set, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and when you finally have that exit strategy, you're gonna be like, wow, you remember when, right?
That's exactly right.
Trying to figure out how to make this thing work, and we were coding, reading books, watching YouTube videos, and that's super cool, man.
Yeah.
What's one thing you do every day, Max, that you think contributes to your success?
I think the ability to focus, especially as an entrepreneur. I try to meditate very regularly. Again, having a clear mind, you have to stay disciplined in what you do, because again, you don't have anyone above you that's really giving you direction, giving you timelines, etc. And so as an entrepreneur, not everyone's built for it. And so I just think it's keeping that a level head, understanding that there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be negatives where, you're kind of going to question your decisions. But you just have to stay strong-willed, and I think that's very broad speaking. But, in terms of actual doing, I just think it's healthy to be out there interacting with people as well, especially for my business development, especially, or sales. You need to practice talking to people. I mean, it's in an age now, especially even younger than me. I'm kind of at the midpoint, but younger than me, these 20-year-olds, they don't know how to talk to people, right? And so that is an art. That is an art, is what I would say. And the more you're able to develop relationships with people, the more successful you're going to be, whether that's with an employer or as an entrepreneur.
That's good stuff, man. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. What's one book, Max, or even a podcast that you'd recommend for aspiring entrepreneurs?
I think the 10% Entrepreneur. It's by a gentleman named Patrick McGinnis, and that's kind of how I got my start. And basically, what it summarized was, look, I have a full-time job, but I have an ambition to be an entrepreneur. Let's do this from a calculated standpoint. Let's start something up that may grow to be a full-time gig. But it kind of dips your foot in the water as well. It's giving you that little bit of experience that you may need. And what I would say is that, frankly, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to kind of go above and beyond. So working your 40-hour-a-week job, you probably need to be willing to spend a little time outside of that if you're truly interested in doing something on your own. And so the 10% Entrepreneur kind of teaches a formula to getting that done. He goes through a lot of case studies about successful entrepreneurs that have kind of taken that route.
Yeah, we call it the side hustle, right? And
exactly. Yep.
Take a little step out there. I always say, you don't have to become an entrepreneur. There's, like I said, a million ways to do it, but you could also do it as a side hustle. Instead of taking that proverbial leap of faith, you could just take a step of faith.
That's right.
And see how it goes. I mean, there's a whole lot of ways, whether it's a service company or a product company, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. What a great time to be an entrepreneur in America, in West Virginia. I mean, we have access to unbelievable opportunities. And I just think that's cool. And I don't think that book's been recommended yet, but we'll make sure we get it listed on our resources section at positivelyw.com, and folks will be able to just click it and buy it right off of Amazon and have it delivered to their home. So thanks for that, Max. We've covered a lot in this interview. We've covered both your companies. Is there anything else you think our listeners should know about your story or about Blackbear Capital or Intellispect?
I think we've covered a lot of it. Again, I think that there are a lot of uncovered opportunities in our state. And I think that's the message that needs to get out, especially to the younger demographic, which I know, we're working on culture. It's kind of a chicken and egg
Yeah.
problem here. You want to have a rooftop bar in your city, but you need the people to support it. So it's kind of like that's an issue we're seeing, but we're starting to attract people. So, what I would say ultimately is that there's opportunity here, especially for young, competent professionals that are willing to accept risk.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. In closing, Max, how can our listeners learn more about Blackbear Capital and Intellispect and maybe even get in contact with you? What's the best way to do that?
Sure. I mean, the best way is probably for Blackbear Capital is the website, which is blackbearcapital.co, and our contact information is there. Of course, we're willing to have conversations just to introduce ourselves and let people know what we do. And then with Intellispect, we have a website which it's very much remote, very much digital, and that website is get.intellispect.co as well. So always open to talking to listeners or aspiring entrepreneurs to provide a little bit of guidance or advice in any way that I can. So I'd be happy to do so.
That's super cool, man. We'll make sure we have those both listed on the show notes section and the Facebook page as well. Max, it's been a real honor to have you on the show today. I think what you're doing is amazing. I love your story, and it's right in line with what we're trying to do here with Positively West Virginia. And I just want to encourage you to keep up the great work, man.
Absolutely. Again, Jim, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I'm excited to continue listening to the show and see what other people are doing inside our state.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of Positively West Virginia. Positively West Virginia is brought to you by the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media as we continue on our journey to help share positive stories of companies and people doing amazing things all across the Mountain State. Just like my good friend here that I just met, Max Knapp of Blackbear Capital and Intellispect. Our hope is that we in some way equipped you and inspired you with his business story, his entrepreneurial journey. If you or someone you know would be a great guest on the show, drop us a line on our website, positivelyWV.com. We appreciate your comments, your encouragement, the reviews on iTunes and Google and everything. We really appreciate that, guys. And of course, we encourage you to share these stories on your social media channels as well. Be sure to check out our weekly show, the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind, every Friday from 11 a.m. to noon, where we bring a panel of business experts from around the state of West Virginia each week to help small business leaders win. Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of advancing small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positivelyWV.com. On behalf of our entire Positively West Virginia team, including our producer today, Mr. Hampton Hill, until next time, I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Stay positive, West Virginia.